I'm going to go ahead and see if I can share content so I can hopefully show a PowerPoint that I have up. Hopefully this works.
Yeah.
I haven't used WebEx too much.
Can you share the content? Yeah. Yeah, we are able to see the content.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so yeah, we can give people a couple minutes to join and then inshallah get started.
Yep. So let's just give them a few minutes, okay?
While people are here, by the way, so applying to med school is just a lot of, obviously it requires a ton of stuff. If you guys have certain parts of it that you want me to focus on, just write in the chat so I can see it, and I'll make sure to focus more on that during the presentation. But besides that, I'll try to just cover the whole gamut of things. And at the end, there's going to be like Q&A. So if you guys have specific questions, you guys can ask them there. What do you think? We should get started at 12:05 then? That'll be good?
Yeah, why don't we begin? Let me just go to the introductions and then we can take over.
Great.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for joining this WebEx session hosted by ICN Academics. We are here to help you guys achieve your academic dreams. One of the dreams a lot of people have is to go to med school. And this presentation by Maaz is talking about med school. Guys, if you can mute in the background. Okay. So Maaz is one of our own. He's just like one of you guys. It will be very beneficial to hear from him. So it will be I muted all, and I'm going to unmute myself. Okay. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So it'll be very beneficial to hear from Maaz. Feel free to ask questions. You can type them, and obviously he'll be able to look at and then answer. Okay. So over to you, Maaz. Please take over.
Okay, sounds good. So there's going to be a lot to talk about, but we'll go ahead and get started. So I just want to start off by just giving you guys some more information on me, just so you know who's talking to you. So I'm a current second year at Harvard Med School. So I grew up in the ICN community, went to high school at McKee Valley, and then did my undergrad at Duke. So did computer science and biology there. And then, yeah, I'm a second year now at Harvard in Boston. I just want to say that I'm not a college counselor or a med school admissions coach or anything like that. I don't think my advice is any better than anyone else's. Alhamdulillah, I think I've been very fortunate to kind of meet the right people at the right time. So I'm hoping that some of my reflections and advice you guys can use and it will be useful to you. And yeah, any questions that you guys have, I'll leave my email at the end as well. Feel free to reach out. I didn't have many mentors, I guess, going through this process. I kind of just flailed around and I guess I hit the right notes, but definitely any questions that you guys have, would love to help out. All right, so we can get started. I tried to make this PowerPoint a little fun. I sort of did it pretty late last night because I have the exam actually coming up too for med school. So I apologize if it's not the best looking PowerPoint, but there's obviously a lot of stuff that med schools care about, right? So I've listed a ton of stuff here and I'm gonna try to hit, some of them. We'll try to hit all of them. I'm not sure how much depth I can go into for each of them, but I'll try. If there's certain areas you guys want me to focus on, let me know for sure. You can feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question or just type in the chat box and things like that. But I think the two most important things, I think a lot of you guys already know this, but the two most important things are going to be GPA and MCAT for sure. And I'll talk a little bit about sort of those things. I just want to reiterate that as well. I think a lot of people ask me, you know, what are the two most important things to get into a good med school or just any med school? And really, it's GPA and MCAT. Fortunately, med school admissions is a very numbers-based game. So you want to make sure that as much control as you have over those things, you really, really focus on getting as best of grades as you can in school, and especially like making sure that you, you know, put in the right prep for the MCAT. And we'll get to a lot of that stuff too. Okay, so I think two questions that I get that I want to start off with as people are sort of starting undergrad is, does my major matter? And then what classes should I take? So I want to just reiterate that your major does not matter. You can major in bio if you're interested. You can do chem, physics. You could also major in computer science or economics or business. You can also major in, I've had friends that have majored in dance or music. I don't know if I should be saying all that in this presentation, but yeah, you really can major in whatever you want. I've had a friend who actually majored in literature and is now in med school. So I think the biggest thing is major in what you're passionate about, because when you're passionate in something, you're going to be around those faculty and those, you know, the students that are interested in the same things. They'll introduce you to this like programs that interest you. And then when you really go far in those programs and really get involved, that's going to shine throughout your application. I really don't recommend that people just do a major because, you know, they just feel like it'll look good for med school. That's definitely not what you should do. But also it's important to keep in mind, like we talked about GPA, that certain majors are a lot more intensive than others, right? So
there is a session about medical students, still the Harvard student.
do you wanna unmute everybody? Or I'm sorry, mute everybody? That's okay.
Yeah, I just muted up. Okay.
I think engineering is one of those majors where I think a lot of people are interested in engineering and computer science, and that's fantastic. Just know that those majors are going to require you to put in a lot more than maybe some other students that are maybe majoring in something like psychiatry or sociology, something like that. So I think what's really key is that whatever you choose to major in, just know how much time you're going to need to put into it, and know that if you take engineering and computer science, your GPA might not be as high. Now, med school certainly recognizes that not all the majors are the same, but that doesn't mean that, you know, if you take engineering and you get like a 3.6 or 3.7, that's going to somehow compensate for people that are applying with a 3.95 or 4.0, right? Your GPA can be a little lower if you're taking a more intensive major, but definitely don't use that as a way to tell yourself that you don't need to get as high of a GPA. That's all I have to say about that. And then what classes should I take? I think honestly, just take classes obviously that help you get through your major, but then also just take fun courses. I think med schools just want to see that you're a person. Like, for example, a course that I took for fun was a course on how to shoot films at Duke. So we learned how to use a mic and how to use cameras and kind of learn some video editing. And that was a really fun course that I did. It helped me get one of my like general education requirements out of the way, but also it was just super fun. So take courses that are fun. Also, though, make sure that if you're interested in applying to certain med schools, go on their website and look to exactly see what their course requirements are. I know, for example, UIC Med School has a really weird requirement where they want you to take 2 classes of the same social science. So, for example, like 2 classes in psych, or 2 classes in sociology, or 2 classes in economics, or something like that. And they won't have to be in the same department. So, in general, most med school class requirements should be the same. Like, you're going to need to take organic chem, physics, bio, things like that. But then it gets weird with, you know, which schools take AP classes, which don't, and which schools have some of these weird hidden requirements that aren't, I mean, known to you unless you kind of dig for them. Just make sure that you research that. They should be available on every school's website. I know for a lot of you, you're not even thinking about which schools to apply to, but, you know, I mean, if you're around ICN and maybe you want to stay in the Chicagoland area, it'd be good to just look at the schools around here. Look at maybe some schools that you'd love to attend, and just see sort of what classes they want you to have taken before you get in. Okay. So this is probably going to take a lot of time on this presentation because this is the question that I get a lot. So MCAT, right? Like MCAT is like sort of the big deal. Everyone's really worried about the MCAT, and rightfully so. You know, MCAT is really stressful. It's a really big part of the med school application process. So I want to make sure that I spend enough time talking about this. And again, really, really urge you guys. I'm going to try to look at the chat as much as I can. I don't see anything now, but you know, after this MCAT, I get through the slide. If there's still extra questions, you feel free to ask them or ask them at the end. So I think the big question everyone wants to know is, how do I study for the MCAT? I think there's 2 main pathways where I study for the MCAT. So the first main path is that people study throughout a semester of their college. So, whether that be fall semester or spring semester, they make sure that that semester they have a lighter course load. So if you normally take, for example, 4 courses, take 3 courses that semester and really treat your MCAT as that extra course and make sure that that course load is very light. And then I think I got a question. Thank you for someone asking the question. Yeah, it's about questions in high school. Yeah, definitely if it's high school related questions, I'll answer that at the end for sure. So yeah, getting back to the MCAT, so either you can study throughout a semester, or what the next way that people do it is that they study throughout a summer, right? So their semester will end, they can take a couple weeks off, and then immediately they'll really treat MCAT studying as sort of like a full-time job that you have over the summer. So I don't recommend that you do research or do some internship and study for the MCAT. I think that's a lot. I think you should really treat your MCAT as sort of your main priority that summer, and just study that entire summer, and then right before your school starts up again, that's when you want to take the MCAT. Right? Those are the 2 main timelines that people sort of use. So the next question is, exactly like, how am I supposed to prioritize studying? But there's 2 main parts of studying for the MCAT. First is content review, which is where you sort of read all the books that the MCAT has to offer related to subjects like biology, chemistry, physics. That's where you're sort of learning all the material. And then it's about practicing questions and exams and all that. So the way I like to say how you should split it up is really like 35 to 40% of your study time in total should be content review, and then about 60 to 65% of your study time should all be dedicated to practice exams, right? And I got one other question. Let me make sure I don't miss it. So someone asked, have you ever heard of anyone taking the MCAT in high school? I have not heard of anyone taking the MCAT in high school, and I 100% do not recommend that you do that. In fact, I would recommend strongly against doing that. I think a lot of college coursework is a lot more intense than what you've done in high school, and a lot of that coursework will prepare you. So when you take classes in college like biochemistry and organic chemistry and things like that, those courses, first of all, aren't offered at most high schools. Even if they are, the level of intensity of those courses are not going to manage a college course load. And those college courses are super critical because all the stuff that you learn is going to then be on the MCAT. So 100% do not recommend anybody to even think about trying to take the MCAT in high school. Also, don't do that to yourself. Like, why would you do that? You got to take the ACT, SAT, like, just worry about getting into a good college and then worry about the MCAT when you're in college. Okay, so getting back to studying for the MCAT, right? So we mentioned that it's a 35 to 40% content review, and the rest should all be for practice exams. So then I think people ask, how do I sort of, what resources do I use and how do I structure studying and all that? So what I recommend is, and this is a little bit weird, but well, okay, let me first start off by just going through the buckets of material that you have to prepare yourself for the MCAT. So online, a lot of test companies are there, like Kaplan, Princeton Review, Next Step. These are all companies that make sort of like books, right? They have books for biology, chemistry, physics, all for MCAT review, right? So that's what you're going to use for content review. Then these same companies will offer exams that they have, right? So those are also available online. These aren't free, by the way. None of what I'm mentioning to you is free. We'll get to that. But they have test exams, test company exams. Like Kaplan has their own exams. Like they have like 10 to 15 exams that you can buy and practice. And they're full-length exams and they're useful. But I want to stress that the most important thing that you guys have to study for the MCAT are the materials released by the AAMC. AAMC are the people that make the MCAT. So their materials are the most similar to what the actual MCAT is going to be like. So make sure that whatever sort of test company bundle that you're buying, make sure that they include AAMC material. So what I use is I bought a Kaplan self-paced course, which not only included the Kaplan set of books, but also included Kaplan exams, and then also included all the AAMC material. It was all kind of bundled into one. And keep your eye out. If you sign up for like newsletters, they have deals throughout the year. I will say that they can be very pricey, but the way I see it is that med school in general is very expensive, and then so is applying to med school. That's going to be very expensive as well. Sending in your applications to all the schools is not free. So I think a lot of people are worried, like, should I really spend this much studying for MCAT? And I think that it 100% is worth it. So any money that you spend now for the MCAT, I think is a small investment because med school and in general is going to be quite expensive. So now that I've said that, I think let's talk a little bit more about sort of how you should approach studying, right? So this might actually confuse a little bit of people, but I would say before you start any studying for the MCAT, take one of the AAMC exams. Now, I know a lot of people might be like, why would I take a AAMC exam? That's like the exam that's like most similar to the MCAT, and I want to save those for the end when I've studied and everything. The reason why I recommend taking one of those is because you really see how the AAMC likes to ask questions. what you'll see is that Kaplan and Princeton Review, a lot of these test companies, when they make their exams, first of all, their exams are a lot harder, and they're a lot more based on recall because the questions that they ask come directly from the books that they've written, right? Where the AAMC, a lot of their material is more application based. So they'll have you read a passage, and most of the questions will be you applying knowledge rather than recalling it. So I think that's a mistake that I did, where I didn't really do a lot of AAMC material until all the way to the end. And what I realized is, as I was getting to the end of my setting, I realized that, wow, I spent so much time on content review because Kaplan made me think that I needed to memorize all these small things when I didn't. So that's why I recommend that before you start off any studying, take a AAMC exam. That'll teach you how the AAMC likes to ask questions on the MCAT. And the thing is, after you finish your studying and like a couple months down the line, when you're taking that exam again, you're not going to remember anything. So it's not like you're wasting that exam or anything like that. So really, it's just there to show you exactly how they ask questions. And of course, when you take it, your score is going to be terrible. There's no reason it should be good because you haven't even started studying it. You're not used to timing and all that. The point is not to get a good score. The point is to make sure you're comfortable with the exam and how they're going to ask questions. So then after that, I think people ask, well, how do I, when I'm doing content review, what should I focus on? So I think I'm going to try to address this in the different blocks that the MCAT has. The first one is biochem. I think first one is actually chem phys, but I'll just start off with biochem. So I think the big thing is when you read these Kaplan books and Princeton Review books, they're going to make you think that you need to know every little detail. Everything that they've highlighted and bolded, they're going to make you think that you need to know that. I just want to stress that you do not need to know every single thing that they've bolded, right? You guys should focus on big picture ideas. So, for example, something that's common on the MCAT is like glycolysis or something. So sort of know what that reaction is, what is it accomplishing? What are the main steps? What are the main ways it's being regulated? And once you have a good idea of that and a good grasp of that, that's it. I wouldn't focus on the smallest part of, where's this carbon going on that molecule, or, what's the name of this small enzyme involved in the pathway, this transporter to get this molecule out of the cell into the cell. Kaplan and these books will make you think that you need to know that because they're just trying to cover their bases. They want to say that, oh, just in case that showed up on the MCAT, we had it in our book. But really, if you try to memorize everything, you're going to first of all start to forget stuff, and you're not going to be able to even really kind of properly even engage with the material because you're so stressed on the small details. That's a mistake that I did, where I kind of focused on all the small details way too much. So I don't want you guys to do the same thing. Make sure you read all the chapters and stuff, but don't focus on the small details. So that's for biochem. And same thing goes for chemistry and organic chemistry as well. They're going to have really, really small details. Make sure you understand like basic ideas and concepts, big, broad ideas. Like, do I know what electronegativity is? Do I know, what happens when I put, these sort of chemicals together in a reaction? Do I know how to do stoichiometry, things like that? But if they're talking about a really specific reaction or really specific reagent that's used in some arbitrary process, even if Kaplan makes it sound like it's the most important thing, if you're reading it and it sounds minor and sounds really minute, and maybe you didn't even cover it in your college course, it probably means it is. So don't stress about it too much. What I will say is physics is a little bit different because it's more math-based. So you want to do more practice problems. Again, I think the books do actually a pretty good job about just covering physics nicely. For physics, to be honest, it's just doing passages and kind of doing the problems, making sure you know how to do force diagrams and how to, calculate how long it'll take a ball to fall off a cliff or something, and kind of being comfortable with like energy equations and all the stuff that you will learn in a physics college course or even in a high school physics course. So that's kind of the general approach to those. Now, a lot of people are always asking me about CARS, which is the critical reading section. So that's when you just read a passage and you answer questions about that passage. The books, to be honest, that Kaplan and Princeton Review give, I didn't think were very useful. I think the best way to approach CARS is to just practice. So every day leading up to your MCAT, just take 15 to 20 minutes out of your day, read a passage and answer questions. And I think the biggest thing is when you review what questions you got right and wrong, make sure you review not only why you got or why the choice is right, so why D is right, but also review why A, B, and C are wrong. Once you understand that and you do that enough, I really think your CARS score will improve. I think it's all about practice. So CARS is really just make sure you do as much practice as possible, and especially if you're seeing your score isn't improving, then just start practicing more. I really don't have a specific strategy that I recommend for CARS. I know a lot of people sometimes people like to read the questions first and then read the passage. Sometimes people like to read the passage quickly twice and then do the questions. For me, to be honest, I just read the passage once through and then immediately went to the questions. And then I think the biggest thing to remind yourself is that no matter how much you think that the answer to the question is not in the passage, it is. There's a certain line in the passage that'll directly help you answer that question. So always when you're doing the question, think there's something in the passage that's 100% leading, like gonna lead me to the right answer. I just need to find it. So that's a general kind of study strategy for cars. Make sure we're good on time. Yeah, we're good. Also, you guys are probably sick of my voice right now because I'm talking a lot. Hopefully this is useful. There's just so much to go through. So I think the last section then is psychology and sociology. Now this is where I'm going to completely switch from what I said about biochem. For biochem and chem phys, I said focus on big picture concepts. But unfortunately for psych-soc, it's really annoying, but you want to just memorize everything. Memorize all the little details that, Freud's stages of development, memorize that. Memorize all the like different theories of cognitive psychology or whatever. I don't even remember the terms anymore because they're so useless. But for some reason, the MCAT thinks that they're useful for us to know. So focus on memorizing them as best as you can, right? So the two strategies that I have for this are, if you go online, a lot of people have Quizlets and kind of like flashcard decks that they've made where they go through and they sort of make, 300 or 400 note cards that have just important psych-soc terms. And before going to bed, what I'd do is I'd just sort of like take 10 minutes before I went to bed, just quickly go through some terms, make sure I knew the terms, and then I would just head to bed. Now, you can either use Quizlet. There's another software that some people like to use to help them memorize called Anki. It's just like Quizlet, except it just what it does is that it shows you note cards periodically. So it might show you a note card, today, and then it might show you that same note card a week from now. And if you look at the note card and you don't know what the answer is, then it'll show you it 2 days from now instead of a week from now, because that means that you need to memorize it more. So it's kind of just a more complex Quizlet. Yeah, so Mustafa asked, could you repeat the other software to Quizlet? It's called Anki, so it's A-N-K-I. There's a lot of videos on YouTube that can help you set it up. A lot of people use it. I didn't personally use Anki, I use Quizlet, but Anki is also a resource that you guys can use to help you memorize things. And people have also made Anki decks to memorize like biochem concepts and chem phys concepts. I didn't think that I needed to memorize that as much. I focused on the bigger picture concepts, well, I tried to. But again, that's up to you guys. So gone through sort of all the little buckets of studying for the MCAT. And I think, once you've spent, 30 to 45% of your time studying for the content review, after that, it's going to be all about your exams, right? So I would say start off by taking maybe like 4 to 5 of your test company exams. So take the Kaplan exams or take the Princeton review exams. I know Next Step also has some great exams that people have said have really helped them, and they're pretty close to how the AAMC likes to ask questions. And you can buy all these exam materials online. So take those exams, and I just want to stress that when you take these exams, your score will not be good when you take them. The reason why, and maybe your score will be good. Maybe you're just crazy smart, and that's awesome. But for a lot of people, when they take these exams, they kind of get demoralized because the score is so low. Now, the reason why is because these test companies make the MCAT practice exams harder on purpose. Because what they want us to happen is that, for example, if you take the Kaplan exam and you don't do as well, but then when you take the actual thing, your score is a lot higher, that makes it really easy for Kaplan to say that, oh, because you took our exams and because you took our course, your score improved. When in reality, the practice exam was just a lot harder. So when you take these practice exams, even if you don't get the best score, just try to convince yourself that these exams are harder, and I'm using these exams more to just make sure that I get my timing down right on things. I think one section where actually these exams do a good job of replicating a AAMC is cars, but biochem, chem phys, and psych-soc were I thought to be a lot harder on the practice exams than the actual thing. Once you've taken 4 to 5 of these test company exams, and another thing about taking exams is make sure you treat it like you're actually taking the real exam, right? So, get up at, whatever your time you're going to get up for the actual thing. So get up at 6, shower, isolate yourself in a room, and then take the exams completely for 7.5 hours, right? You might have to just waste an entire Saturday or something just taking an exam. I know it sucks, but that's kind of, you got to just train yourself to basically be in that sort of mindset for that long, because it is mentally really draining. Make sure you take your breaks properly and try to treat it as much as you're taking the real thing at all times. So that's all I have to say about that. So after you've taken your 4 to 5 test company exams, like Kaplan exams, then you want to immediately just focus on your AAMC material. So AAMC, if you go on their website, they have a bundle where they have 4 exams that they've previously released. These are going to be your most useful exams to take because they're going to be most similar to the actual thing, right? So take these exams. The AAMC has question banks, so they have tons of questions from previous MCATs that they released. You really want to make sure that you focus a lot of time on making sure you're understanding how the AAMC is asking questions. So majority of your time should really be focused on AAMC material, right? Don't leave it for the end, right? Don't leave it, oh, I'm 2 weeks away from my MCAT, and now I'm going to start AAMC. That's not what you should be doing. You should be starting AAMC much earlier and really, really understanding how they're asking questions, going back to your content review and saying, oh, they asked a question about, this thing in organic chemistry. I've never even heard of it. Let me go back to content review and make sure I know what they're talking about. And let me just make sure I got another question. No, we're good. Okay. Yes, I got a question about SAT or ACT. I will try to address all high school questions towards the end. I'm going to focus a lot more on the people that are already in college and are going to be applying to med school, but yes, I can answer those questions at the end. Okay, I already talked about what prep resources I used. I used the Kaplan self-paced course. You don't have to use that. I don't think Kaplan is better than any other test company. You can use Princeton Review. You can use any company that you want. Just make sure that, convince yourself that it's important to invest in these things now. So even if you have to spend $200, $400, $500 on exams, I 100% think it's worth it. And then one thing I also want to stress about the MCAT is this is not like the SAT or ACT in which you can sort of take the exam multiple times. I mean, you can take the MCAT multiple times. No one's going to stop you, but it's sort of not as encouraged. With the SAT and ACT, I felt like I could take it 4 to 5 times. I could super score my exam scores and make them look really good. And I didn't really care too much about, this exact SAT is going to be the SAT where I have to kill it. But the MCAT, it's really the opposite. You want to make sure that the MCAT, like when you take it, that's when you're 100% certain that you're okay with what your practice scores have been, and that's how you're going to score on the actual thing, right? And you really shouldn't even think about trying to retake it. Now, I can understand some people when they take it, if something happens on the morning of, or they get super stressed and they take the MCAT and they don't do as well, like that happens, life happens. I think the really important thing is if you take an MCAT and your score isn't great, take some time off and really make sure you study for the MCAT well next time around and make sure your score shows a significant improvement. So if you take the MCAT and get like a 508 and then take the MCAT again and get a 510, that's going to look terrible. Because even though your score went up 2 points, you still had to take it twice and you barely had any improvement. So I've had friends where morning of, something happens and they don't do well at all. And, they get like a 507 or 506 on the MCAT. But then they restudy, they're in a better state of mind. And when they retake it, they get like a 517 or 518, which is a really great score. So those are the sort of jumps that med schools will care about. But in general, do not think of this as an exam that you take more than once. And so what I recommend is that, I got a question. What's a good score for the MCAT I recommended? Yes, I will get there. Just give me 1 sec. So I think that I lost my train of thought. Give me 1 sec. I guess I was right there to talking about good score for the MCAT anyway. But what I want to say is that, about 2 weeks to 1.5 weeks before your actual MCAT date, take the last AAMC exam that you have available. And the score that you get on that is going to more or less be the score that you get on the real thing, okay? If you take that exam and your score is not where you want it to be, don't take the MCAT. Cancel it. You might lose out on money that you applied for the MCAT, but that is fine. It is totally fine to push back your MCAT, cancel it. No med school will know if you've pushed back the MCAT or not. So if let's say you're taking the MCAT in 2 weeks and you take the exam and you want to get a 510 and you get a 505 and you've only been getting around a 505, I would 100% not recommend you to take the MCAT. I would push it back. Much better to push the MCAT back than to take it and not get the score that you want and then have to worry about, now I have to show this amazing improvement and take it a second time. Also, studying for the MCAT is just stressful. I mean, college is something where, you want to study for the MCAT, you got to do well in school, you got to do extracurriculars. There's a lot of stuff that you got to do. So don't let your MCAT, take too much of your time. Okay, so good score for the MCAT, I would say it really depends on what colleges you want to apply to. So one resource that I recommend is it comes to be about $35. It's something called MSAR, M-S-A-R. It's basically a resource online that most pre-meds buy, and it basically just tells you the median MCAT and GPA ranges and just a bunch of really useful information about kind of all the med schools in the country. So for example, like which med schools accept out-of-state applicants, which don't, how many people from Illinois got into a certain med school last year, things like that. They have a lot of really detailed resources. So I think make a list of schools that you really want to see yourself in and look at their median MCAT scores and shoot for that. Now, I know that's kind of a cop-out question or a cop-out answer. So I will say that I think a good score for the MCAT is if you can get around a 512, 513, 514 in that range, I think you'll be good for most, definitely for most DO programs, and then definitely for some, local med schools as well. I think if you want to shoot for really top level med schools, I think what you really want to do is get at least a 518 on the MCAT. 519, whoops, go back one slide. Yeah, 519 is probably, where that's the score that's not going to hold you back. Let me put it that way for these top med schools. So if you get a 519 on your MCAT, you know that, okay, at least my score is not holding me back. Everything else in my application just has to be great now. So those are numbers to keep in mind. And we're at the halfway point. I just want to say that people have to go exactly at 1. That's totally fair. I can stay a little bit later as well. Okay. So then, I think the next big question is about extracurriculars. So a lot of people ask me, what did you do in undergrad? And I can talk to you all about that. I just want to cover these sort of main points really quickly. So I think that one of the biggest things that people worry about is research. There's 2 types of research that you can do in undergrad. You can do wet lab research, which is where you're going to be working with like bacteria or cell cultures, and you're going to be pipetting like microliters of solution into another thing and doing lab techniques and things like that. Or you can do research that is not lab-based. You can do research that maybe is on the computer. Maybe you're helping code an algorithm for some bioinformatics project. Maybe you're working on a health policy project and you're really interested in health policy. Maybe you're working on sort of like analyzing images, and that's what you're really passionate about. So I just want to stress that if you don't like working in a lab, there's still many other ways for you to do research. There's some research where you just interview patients and you talk to them, and then you can compile their responses and try to get findings out of that. That's called qualitative research. So really ask your advisors, I'm not interested in wet lab research, but I still want to do research. What opportunities are there for me to do qualitative research or policy research or, tech informatics research or things like that. I think one thing that people really stress about is papers and publications. I just want to say that you do not need a publication to get into med school. You 100% do not. I think a lot of people might be shocked, but I did not have a college publication, and I'm at HMS in Boston now. So yes, even Harvard, you don't need to have a publication to get into Harvard Med School. Really, research is something that they want to see. Is that something that you attempted, something where you really showed, you being inquisitive, and something where even if you didn't like it, maybe you can get a letter of recommendation from your research mentor who really said that, he or she was really passionate about the work that they did. Or maybe you can just put in a ton of time and talk about what it meant to you to sort of lead a project and lead a question and see it get carried out. So in my undergrad experience, I did research during my wet lab. Like I did like a wet lab project on breast cancer therapy. Did it for a couple months and just didn't enjoy it. I thought it was super boring, so decided to drop it. And then I got into a more qualitative project that looked at sort of disability globally and sort of how do we take care of patients that are transitioning from the hospital and going back to home that are disabled. The research that I did with that didn't get published, but I talked about it in my application and said that, I really enjoyed, going through this process and forming a question, tackling an issue with my team. And I thought that was, and I think med schools appreciated that. Again, you do not need to get a paper. And also don't make your med school experience miserable. If you don't like research and you don't like the wet lab that you're in, you don't need to be in that wet lab. I just want to stress that you don't need to you'll see people around publishing in Science and Nature, and they spend all their time in labs. That was not me. I did not do that because that's just something I didn't find interesting. Just keep that in mind. I think the next big thing is kind of volunteering in your clinical and non-clinical experiences. It's really good to have clinical volunteering experiences, right, where you're doing actually hands-on stuff. So not that you're just sitting at a counter and saying hello to patients when they walk in, but really experiences where you're actually dealing with patients and you're involved clinically. So I volunteered at the Children's Hospital at Duke, where I worked with sort of kids that had just sort of had cancer treatment done with them, and I just played games with them. We played board games, we painted, read them books. It was something I look forward to doing every week, and it just really taught me to appreciate being around patients all the time. But on top of that, make sure that you also have non-clinical activities as well. So not everything in your application needs to be medicine related. And in fact, it shouldn't, because then you just look like a very boring person. Do stuff that you're interested in. So one thing that I wanted to just make sure that I was stuck with is my Spanish speaking ability. So I volunteered. I was an ESL tutor actually at Duke. So people came in that wanted to learn more English. And in the process of me teaching them English, a lot of them were Spanish speakers. So I had to use a lot of Spanish. And I love that. I love being able to teach people English and make their English better. I just want to say on the topic of clinical things, I think a lot of people think that they need to have 2,000 hours of volunteering because some student on the internet has 2,000 hours of volunteering or 4,000 hours of volunteering. You do not need that. I think I had maybe 250 hours of volunteering. I did volunteering across my 4 years at Duke about 2 times a week, 2 hours a week. And some weeks if I had an exam, I wouldn't go. So do not look at people that have 4,000 hours and think you need 4,000 hours of volunteering. You do not need that much. Also, some people, if they don't have enough clinical experience, they do things like they scribe or they do, they become an EMT. You can totally do that. I just want to say that that's not necessary. I didn't scribe. I didn't do an EMT position. The main clinical exposure that I had that I talked about in my application was volunteering and playing with these kids. So don't stress yourself out about those small things. Like, oh, I saw somebody else that has like 10,000 hours because they were a medical scribe during their gap year or something. You don't need to do that. So then moving on to work experience, it's always good to have work experience. It's not necessary, but it just shows a different level of sort of maturity. When you're working towards a project, when you're with a team, you can have sort of the leader of whatever experience that you are working with, talk highly about you during your letter of recommendation and things like that. So it's a good way to get a good letter of rec. Also, it's just a good way to just, diversify your application. There's a ton of summer internships. If you Google on the internet, a ton of positions where you could, maybe get like a grant from your school and do some research, or maybe you could go on some sort of fellowship and just learn. Maybe you can do a study abroad project. There's a lot of stuff that you can do over your summer. I just want to stress that you don't need to do something every summer. In fact, a lot of summers of undergrad, I had friends that were going out and doing research at the NIH and all that. And I decided to just stay home because I wanted to be home for Ramadan. And that's fine. So don't stress yourself out about it. But if you can do some summer internships, I think it's definitely a plus. I think the biggest thing is whatever activities that you do in med school, make sure that you try to get leadership positions in those activities. So really you want to make sure that if you're passionate about something, really try to, be involved in that organization, not just as a volunteer, as a member, but really try to alter it, try to make it better. Talk about, and these are really great ways that you can tell your med schools about how you improved. Like you could say, I led an organization and, we had this pitfall. We tried to do this event and it didn't work out, but then I recovered and we recovered as a team and we were able to hold something else and it was really great. It teaches you a lot about how to lead a team, how to deal with people. 100% try to get on these executive boards as much as you can. This doesn't mean that you should be a president of 7 things, because then that really shows that you're not really actually doing much for these actual organizations. I would say if you can be a president of maybe 1 to 2 organizations that you're super passionate about on campus, that's great. And make sure you actually do something as a part of those organizations. Lead a drive or lead a volunteering experience or something like that. And I just want to say, I think med schools really just want to see that you're a person. So do things that you find fun and that you make your application stand out. If you're interested in coding and technology, and you like working on websites or like working on algorithms for fun, do that. And you can talk about that in your application. If you like art and you like painting, do that. And you could talk about art in your application and how that's something that you did. And maybe you could, paint murals at the local hospital, or maybe paint art and then, be a part of some sort of art drive that you can give your art to patients and make them feel good. Because a lot of people, when they see art, it's cathartic for them, right? Maybe you're interested in, sports. Maybe you just love playing tennis, or you love playing basketball. I had some friends that loved playing tennis, and they started an academy I can't talk. They started an academy in undergrad where they basically tutored local kids on how to play tennis. So I think that anything that you're interested in, it's going to really shine in your application, right? They're going to see that you're a person. I had a friend who loved making videos. So he made videos documenting the lives of patients in the hospital, and the hospital loved it. And then he was able to actually show that in one of his interviews, and people were really impressed. So just make sure you also have fun. If you're interested in rock climbing, if you're interested in, just because I know that this is something more relevant to us, I had a friend who loved putting mehndi on others. And what she did was she started a program where she actually just put mehndi on cancer patients at the hospital, and people loved it. And she was able to gain so much satisfaction from that because she loved doing it. And she also was able to, help patients out at the same time. So keep all those things in mind. Don't force yourself to do something. Just do what you enjoy. And when people see that shine in your application, that's really how you get into a good school. When they see that you're not just a person that, because, everyone will have done research, volunteering, leadership, but really it's these passion projects that help you stand out and show how you're diverse. Another thing I just want to touch on is shadowing. Again, I don't think you need 2,000 hours of shadowing. Some people on the internet are crazy, and I've done 700 hours, 800 hours of shadowing. That's not necessary. I had about maybe 100, 120 hours of shadowing. I did a ton at Duke Hospital, but also some back at home. Really, shadowing is just making sure that you understand what it's like to, be in the operating room, or what it's like to sort of be in the clinic and sort of see what doctors do. But to be honest, everyone knows that people do shadowing. No one really cares about it. It's kind of one of those things where you just got to take off Don't spend too much time on it. Get a couple hours in, and then that's it. So this is something that I want to address because a lot of people are really scared. I think a lot of parents as well freak out when I mention the term gap year, because in the Desi Brown Muslim community, whatever, I think everybody thinks about, oh my God, like we gotta like, this is like a race and we gotta get through med school super quick, because in India they do it in like 2 years, and like you gotta start, like when are you getting married, and all this stuff. I think it's really important to know that taking a year in between undergrad and med school can be really, really helpful for students. I know some parents are probably freaking out, but I really want to reassure you that I think it's a really good idea. I don't think it's for everybody, so you 100% do not have to do this. But what I will say is, for example, at Duke Med, I think over 70% of the class this year, I have friends at Duke Med, they were telling me 70% of the class this year actually had taken at least one gap year. So what taking a gap year really allows you to do is allows you to slow things down in med school, in undergrad. So you can take your courses, instead of cramming all your courses at once, you could take more varied courses. You have more time to study for the MCAT, more time to sort of prepare your application, and have more activities that you can talk about. I think one really great advantage of a gap year is that when you take your gap year and you're interviewing in your gap year, you don't have to do, you're not a senior in college. So you don't have to like worry about exams and worry about classwork. You're working somewhere or you're at home, and you can plan your interviews better. At the same time, during your interviews, the question that they'll ask you is, what are you doing during your gap year? And you can talk a ton about it, right? Find something you're passionate about. So for me, I was really interested in tech. And I decided, alhamdulillah, I was super lucky to get an opportunity at a tech startup. And I just was a Python programmer there. We worked with health systems, and we made applications for them.
He's all talking about Java.
Was that a question that someone had? I think someone just unmuted. That's fine. Yeah, find an opportunity that you're interested in, and really that can make your application shine so much more. It could really, I'm not even kidding. Like I don't think I would be at Harvard right now without the opportunity for my gap year. I think it was something that I talked about in all my interviews. I think people really loved it when they could see how passionate I was about it. And also, I think I was just less stressed. I think I had more time to sort of take the MCAT, more time to sort of prepare my application. Whereas I feel like if I didn't have the gap year, I'd have to, squish everything in. Some of you guys are rock stars and are like super ahead of me, and like are probably taking the MCAT your sophomore year, and you've already taken your courses, and who you're going to get your letters of rec from. And if you're on that boat, amazing. You don't need to take a gap year. If you feel like your application is already great, you already have some, you're leading a NGO or something, or a nonprofit, and you're just doing amazing things, that's fantastic. Don't do a gap year if you don't need to. But I just want to say that to all the parents that are maybe listening and are freaking out, a lot of students take gap years, and it really helps them. It can really help your child go from maybe a med school that is great, or to a med school that they really wanted to go to just because they took an extra year. And the thing is, way down the road, you don't even know what residency you're going to be in. So if you decide to be in a surgery residency, that's going to be like 6 years, right? And in the long term, that extra year that you took in between is not going to matter a lot. In fact, that might shoot you into a program or into a network, a group of people that might completely change your career trajectory, right? And you really, really help you become an even better doctor, or get into a program that's like fantastic and really going to support you. So I think gap years are good, not necessary, but also not something that parents should freak out about and really discourage their children from. Ask yourself, do I have enough time? Do I think this year is going to really help me? There's a ton of stuff you can do. Like you can do a Fulbright scholarship. You could, you could do another degree if you wanted to. You could just spend a year getting more clinical experience, or you could just work. Actually, the reason why I did my gap year opportunity also is because I worked. I was able to, alhamdulillah, get some sort of income, which was really useful for me. I saved a lot of it up, and I was able to, pay off some med school tuition with that. That's also something to keep in mind too. Okay, so we're moving on to more application parts of the process now. So I'm just going to touch on this super quickly. A lot of people ask about letters of rec. To be honest, it depends on the school. Some schools want maybe 4, some schools want 5. Some schools want it to be from 2 science faculty, and some schools want it to be from 3 science faculty. So I think just general advice is a good number to shoot for. It's 4 to 5 letters of rec. And usually it comes to be about 2 from science faculty that you've had, 1 from a non-science class. Maybe that's like an English or psych class that you had that you thought was really interesting, and 1 to 2 from some sort of extracurriculars. Maybe you were organizing a volunteer activity, and maybe it's the volunteer coordinator who saw you do a ton of work. Maybe it's an activity where, maybe it's a job that you had and your manager could talk about how great you were. Really, I know a lot of people ask, like, well, I'm in pre-med classes, there are like 200 people. How am I supposed to get my professor's attention? I'm kind of shy. I don't like sitting up in the front. That's fine. I think really a lot of places where you're going to get to know your professor is throughout things like office hours, right? So it sounds kind of artificial, but just try to get to know your professor. Like, go to office hours, even if you don't have questions, ask things, get to know them. They're genuine people, and they, if they're a good professor and they're going to write you a good letter of rec, they're going to want to get to know you. Just talk to people that you find are really interested in the same things as you, that, maybe that you really like being in their class. They like having you in class. You want to kind of get letters of recommendation from people that can like talk about like specific experiences that, you were part of in their class. So for example, like, oh, I remember this time when the student asked this wonderful question and it was so great to see how focused they were. Or this time when the student didn't do well on the first exam, but reached out to me, a lot better moving forward. And, they're able to come out of the class with an A or something like that. The point of letters of rec is to get letters from people that you know and who know you, not to get it from the leading researcher at the school or the head of the department, or people's status does not matter for letters of rec. Make sure you get it from people that know you well. Okay, so again, I'm sorry guys, I've been talking a lot. I know you guys are probably sick of hearing my voice. There's just so much to go over.
It's very
okay. So I want to talk about personal statement really quickly. This is also something where I get a lot of questions about, where people ask me, can you read my personal statement? Can you give me advice on if it's good, if it's not? I'm hoping that what we can do actually in the future is maybe form like some sort of like Excel document where we can have people's names and email addresses that have successfully gotten into med school, and then people can reach out to a bunch of email sort of this listserv, and anyone can reach out and have like a personal statement. Can you take a look at it? And then people can basically help edit each other's personal statement. I think that'd be great.
That's excellent.
I'm just I think I'm just going to list a couple bullet points. I think that a lot of people, that kind of general advice that I have, it's really hard to kind of give advice if I haven't seen your personal statement. But I think the biggest story is just like answer the question, like, what's your story and why medicine, right? This is not like a three-pronged essay. You're not writing an FRQ. You're not writing a college essay. They just want to know what your story is. Just be yourself. Don't try to make yourself sound super intelligent or smart. Use just like when you read your essay, it should really just scream that this is who I am. And a lot of people are confused, where do I even start? And I say sort of pick 3 meaningful life experiences you've had that have really convinced you that medicine is the path for you, and just start typing. Don't even think about, does it sound good? Just start typing. And instead of just writing that, for example, like writing that I volunteered at the hospital and it really was a fulfilling experience. That's like you're telling something, but you want to make sure you always show. So I always stress that use personal examples. Talk about, like say, one morning I came in and there was this little girl, Laura, and, I saw that, she looked very pale from her recent cancer treatment and she was not having a good day. And I was able to, work with her, and, we were able to play board games, and I instantly saw her smile, and that really, brought a sense of fulfillment to me. And, I was able to meet Laura's parents, and, they are, they were so glad that I was able to help their little girl out, and that made me feel so good. If you use personal examples like that in your personal statement, that's going to just exactly, make it sound more personal. And I think med schools will love that. They're really tired of hearing the same exact stuff where people are like, yeah, I like dealing with patients, I like helping people. You want to make sure that you use personal examples and are as personal as possible. And at the same time, this is not a place where you want to just list, here are the 15 million things that I did, look at the cool research I did, look at the cool fellowships I was a part of. Like, this is not what you want a laundry list, right? If you pick experiences, make sure you go deep into those experiences and talk about, why was this meaningful to me? It's about depth, not breadth, okay? And then I think another important idea is to sort of, make sure you connect your ideas together. So a lot of people, what they do is, they'll mention 3 activities, and at the end, they'll be like, so in conclusion, this, and this is why I want to go into medicine. Again, you're not treating it like an essay. You're supposed to treat it like a story. So maybe you could say something like, I got into college and I was really always interested about, in science. And so I did a, research opportunity. And that could be about your first paragraph about how you were so inquisitive and you were able to help out in a research opportunity. But then you could be like, but a part of me always craves, personal interaction. And so then I decided to start volunteering at the Children's Hospital. And that's where I was able to have this experience with this girl, and you could write about that experience. And then you could say maybe another experience where you're like, I was able to help this single girl out, but then I wanted to help a broader variety of people. So then I decided to volunteer with people that needed to learn English. And I was able to help them and really kind of like make an impact on their whole community. And I think that at the end, you could sort of say, all these experiences have taught me as a physician that I can make an impact, on people's lives individually, but also on a community at large. And that way you can see that instead of you writing out 3 different points and at the end saying, in conclusion, this is why, the way that I just framed those 3 activities, you could see that I was flowing from one activity to the other. So that's what I mean when I say connect ideas together. It should really be a story. It shouldn't be a sort of, here's a million things that I did and here's why I'm a good prospective student for your med school. They don't care about that. They want to know what your story is and why you want to do medicine. One thing to keep in mind is that people are reading your personal statement mad fast. They have a ton of applications to go through. So I think a really big important thing is to know that draw the reader in. So whatever introduction that you write, make sure it's like starting off with something captivating and exciting so that, after they've gone through 15 personal statements already that day, when they read your first couple sentences, they're like, oh, this sounds cool. And then they'll read, the body of your personal statement. And then just make sure that you're really focusing on closing out strong. So don't use things like in conclusion or these 3 things are why I want to go into medicine. Talk about really maybe how your outlook in the beginning of your journey was different and how now, having talked about these experiences and reflecting on them, your ideas of why you want to go into medicine are even stronger than before, how they've changed. Really make sure that it's something that's a meaningful kind of conclusion, not a conclusion that sounds forced. And it will take time. I think writing a good intro and good conclusion are things that you want to focus a lot of time on. Personal statements, guys, are like super important. They get sent to every single med school that you apply to. You want to spend a ton of time on them. You want to get them edited by a bunch of folks. There's not an essay that you want to rush, right? You can ask your pre-med advisor committee to also take a look if they do personal statement edits. But just make sure that you talk a lot, or make sure that you spend a lot of time on your personal statement. And then the last thing I wrote this year is that real essays from Stanford medical students. If you search it up on Google, I think the first link it should be titled Real Essays from Stanford Medical Students. And there's just a variety of personal statements that real medical students at Stanford wrote. And they can kind of show you what a broad variety of good personal statements look like. Now, I'm not saying that, that's how I did my personal statements. I think there's a huge variety of personal statements that are on that website, but at least it'll give you an idea of maybe things that I mentioned, or maybe some place to start so that you don't feel like you're starting from nowhere, because I know it can be a little bit daunting. I did get a question. Let me make sure. Someone asked, can we have a follow-up session that focuses on the high school to undergrad? Yeah, I'll try to address some of the questions in the Q&A session. Again, this is really focused on people that are directly applying to med school, but I'm sure there's people that are currently in undergrad that can really talk about how they transition from high school to undergrad. And I'll address that in the question and answer session too. Okay. So now I'm going to focus on sort of applying, the sort of pitfalls to applying to med school and sort of common mistakes that people do. Biggest thing about applying to med school, guys, is applying early, right? So the MCAT, the primary application, is going to open May 1st. And to be honest, at that point, you should probably already have your personal statement written, and you should already have sort of like parts of your application done. But if they're not, that's fine. But really make sure that by the time the primary application opens on May 30th, submit it within 1 to 2 days, right? Do not delay this. Make sure you submit it early, because the earlier you submit, the earlier your application will get verified, the earlier your med schools will see your application, and the earlier they'll send you secondaries. It's also super important that if you submit early, then you just have like a month before you get secondaries where you can pre-write your secondaries. When I say pre-write, what that means is that, let's say you're interested in applying to University of Chicago med school. So go on Student Doctor Network, it's a forum online, and search up University of Chicago med school essay questions from the previous year. And they'll have like, the 2 essay questions that they ask people to write about. So you can just already have those essay questions ready and start pre-writing them, so that when you get an email in a month from University of Chicago saying, hey, can you write us back these essays? You can just copy and paste your answers straight in and then like send it right back. And what that does is that the earlier that you get in your secondaries, the earlier they'll see your completed application, and then you can get interviews earlier. I want to say, I can't stress enough how important it is to get in your secondaries as soon as possible. A lot of great medical students or friends that I have had like amazing applications, but they delay their secondaries, or maybe they don't get in the applications on time. And unfortunately, they're not able to get into the med schools that they want, or maybe they have to even repeat an entire cycle and apply next year. So I would say when you get your secondary, try to set yourself a deadline, but within a week, I'm going to go ahead and submit this back to the school, get this back to the school. If you can't get it in a week, that's fine, but really try to set yourself like a max deadline of 2 weeks. Like no matter what, if I got a secondary from Vanderbilt today, I'm going to 100%, no matter what happens, I'm getting the secondary back to them within 2 weeks for sure. Because if you delay writing your secondary, that also shows to the school that they're not as important to you. And so I think for secondaries, it's a little bit different than primaries. You don't want to spend like your personal statement, spend a ton of time on. Secondaries, if you write, you can spend a ton of time on them, but really like don't kill yourself over the secondary. You can get it edited from a couple friends, do a couple edits, but after that, really just focus on, am I answering the question? If you feel like you did, you don't have to make it sound super nice. Just go ahead and submit, and make sure that you submit on time. That's the biggest thing. We'll talk about interviews and stuff in a little bit, but those are just general tips about applying. It's just biggest advice is apply as early as possible. Okay. So interviews, a lot of people ask, how did you prepare for interviews? So I think these are sort of the three things that I did. I think my preparation for interviews is a little bit non-traditional. I mean, I think a lot of people, what they do is they kind of go overboard and they rehearse all their answers and they kind of practice a ton. Some friends I had like videotape themselves talking and like practicing an interview with like a friend, and then they would like give each other advice. You can do that if you want. I personally approached the interviews much more laxly because I wanted it to be like more natural, I guess. I think they wanted to see that you're a person. I think a lot of pre-med advisors sort of freak their students out by making interviews sound like the most deadly thing on the planet. They're like, oh, well, if you cross your legs, or if you have like, I had some advisor told me in undergrad that if you roll up your sleeves, that's like a really bad thing. And that's like, oh my God, like they would never let you in. Or if you pause too long in between an answer or something, that shows that you're not confident. Like, do not listen to any of that. These are real people, and they genuinely want you to come to their med school. Like, if I was interviewing somebody, I would want to be able to say that, oh, the person that I interviewed is now accepted and is now coming. Really, all they're doing is they're trying to look for positive values or positive traits that you have that they can add to your application. So that when your name comes up to the committee, they can say that, oh, I interviewed this person and this person was really great. We had a great conversation about this, X, Y, Z. Common questions that they'll ask you are like, tell me about yourself, or what are you passionate about, or what are you interested in? I think for some reason I thought going into the interview process that they would sort of like try to grill me and they would ask me really hard questions. I can't even recall a single experience where I had them ask me like a really, really tough question out of nowhere. I think at my Harvard interview, they asked me, what do you think about universal healthcare? But, I gave like a very short answer. I said, you know what, here's some basic thoughts that I have about it. To be honest, I don't know too much about it, but I'd love to learn more. And like, that's fine, right? That's totally fine to say. You don't need to lie or try to BS. Or if you don't know the answer to the question, feel free to just say you don't know. I think one thing that's really great is if you type in 50 common medical school interview questions, French Review has them. Do not try to rehearse or write out an answer to all of these. I just skimmed them and just thought about, do I have a general idea of what I would say? And if I had a general idea, I'd be like, okay, that's cool. And then the night before I interviewed, I would reread over my application, my primary, to just make sure that I, write over my personal statement again, write over the activities that I wrote, talked about, or just made sure I was familiar with, oh, like in my personal statement, I mentioned this, something that they could ask me about. Am I familiar with that right now? And then I also just spent like 15 to 20 minutes just going to the school's website and just doing a little research on just, what's the school like? What activities do they have that are unique to this school? Maybe I can ask about this activity during your interview so that they think I'm interested, X, Y, Z. Again, do not stress about this. I'm talking about literally if your interview is at 8 a.m. the next day, like 9 p.m. the day before, spend like 20 minutes doing this. 20 minutes just looking over your application, 20 minutes just like looking up the school, just casually. It's not something to stress about. I think people really stress themselves out about interviews, and really it's about just having a conversation. And I know this is really easy for me to say because I've already gone through the whole process. And when I was first entering it, it was really stressful. But I think after your first interview, you're going to realize that it's really just about having a conversation. Now, one thing that I want to want to say, it is 1 o'clock actually. So if people have to head out, I'm really sorry. I'm almost done with this presentation, and just give me 5 or 10 more minutes and we'll get to a Q&A session. But this is all for sort of a traditional med school interview. There's another type of interview called MMI, which is called multiple mini interviews. You can watch videos on MMIs on YouTube. They sound a lot more stressful than they are. To be honest, they're kind of fun. You have like 7 or 8 stations, and all the, you're interviewing with like 10 or 8 people, and each person will be assigned to each station. And for example, some stations you'll meet a person and they'll ask you about some ethical scenario, and trust me, you don't need to like have the right answer. There is no right answer. They just want to make sure that you are able to think on your feet and that you just are able to think through things clearly, which I think a lot of people can. I think they just stress themselves out about it. Some stations they have is like you're with a partner and you have to sort of give the partner instructions on how to make a Lego set. So they try to make it fun. Some questions you'll get to and they'll ask you to write a little like quick paragraph on something that you're passionate about. The MMIs tend to be fun. They're not like a traditional med school interview. Watch a video on an MMI on YouTube. I don't want to spend too much time on it. Certain med schools do MMIs. I know Duke Med School does an MMI, but for example, Harvard does a traditional interview, and so Stanford does an MMI, but like, Yale does a traditional interview. So kind of just look at what schools do what and prepare yourself accordingly. MMIs are fun and not to be stressed about. Okay, I wanted to focus on this. So applying to med school is a super long process. After you send in your secondary, you're waiting for interviews, and even after your interview, it's gonna be a while, right? I think a lot of, especially to a lot of the parents, if it's not like, you might not hear that your child gets into med school until April or until February, until March or something. It's a very long process, but I think it's just important to, trust in yourself and trust in everything that you've done. I think one thing that people do, this is a great question. Yes, I will go ahead and answer that. Just give me a sec. If I don't get to it, remind me. I'll get to a Q&A at the end. Give me a sec. So one thing I want to say is that med school admissions, guys, is really, really confusing, right? I've had friends not get even interviews to their state school, and then they're at Harvard right now. Okay, I've had friends that have done the opposite. They're at their state school, but they didn't get an interview from Harvard. I've had friends with very similar applications like one of them gets interviews and one of them does not, right? I've had, I think this really gets to be a problem when people start comparing themselves and they get stressed about it, right? Don't think that, me and my friend sent my application or our applications on the same day, but he got an interview within a week and it's been like a month and I haven't gotten anything. That's like, don't stress about that. I've had friends who've gotten interviews like a week after they sent their application and they get rejected. And then I've had friends get interviews all the way in February and then they get into the school. So do not try to make these relationships in your head that, they haven't interviewed me yet because I'm a low tier candidate or something, or other people have like 10 interviews already and like it's October and I only have 1, or maybe it's October and you have 0. Like, I want to say that I actually got most of my interviews in October. I had friends that had gotten like 5, 6, 7 interviews in August and September. I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of stressed because I thought, wow, like I haven't even gotten a single interview invite yet. Maybe I didn't submit things on time. Maybe my application wasn't that great. So I think the biggest thing is you will meet people on the internet and on these forums that, they submit their application and they have 20 interviews and, they're getting into every single med school. You just know that everyone's different. Nobody really knows what med schools are looking for. I mean, the fact that some people can get into Harvard and not get into a state school, like, speaks volumes, right? This whole process is very, very individualized, very personal. Two people can interview on the exact same day and they can find out about acceptances months apart. So it's gonna be hard to not stress about these things, but I just want to reiterate that everything works out in the end, inshallah. Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to open up the questions. I just want to address the question that someone else mentioned. So how many med school did you apply to and how many interviews did you get? Okay. So I think it's a good question. So I think on average, you should look to apply to about, I would say 23 to, about 23 med schools, I think. I know that's a lot, but I mean, I just want to say that this is not like undergrad. To be frank, the majority of med schools that you apply to, you will get rejected, right? I mean, I did as well. I'm not speaking as like I'm some star candidate or something like that. I applied to so many med schools and got rejected. Didn't even get an interview invite, right? So I applied to, I think, if I'm trying to remember, I applied to 22 med schools and I got interviews, I think about 10 of them, right? So again, I want to say that I got interviews at only 10 of those med schools. I mean, over half of the schools I applied to, I got rejected from. I didn't get an interview, right? And I got into about, I'm trying to recall, I think it was about, I got into about 4 or 5 schools. So again, I interviewed at 10 and I only got into 4 or 5. That's why you want to apply to a ton of schools, because, I mean, I just want to say, like, for example, like I got into Harvard, but I didn't get into like a Case Western Reserve med school. I didn't get an interview from them, right? Whereas Harvard's #1 and Case Western's like a lot lower on the ranking or whatever. I'm just trying to reiterate that don't try to convince yourself that, you know, that I didn't get into a certain school, like everything is over. Like I got rejected from my safety school. That means I'm not getting into any school. There's no such thing as a safety school. Nobody even knows how these committees work and all that. So don't stress about that too much. Okay. So hopefully that answers the question about how many med schools you applied to. Let's see. What AP course did you take in high school? Okay. And how do these credits transfer? Okay. Give me 1 sec. I'm going to answer the AP. I'm going to answer the high school questions. Let me just make sure I answer the questions for people that are in college right now. But I feel like I've been ignoring high school people a lot. I'm not trying to ignore you guys. I just want to make sure that people that are in college right now, I can answer their questions because it's most directly applicable to them. So someone asked, what MS program or postbac should I do to improve GPA, and any advice for non-trad applicants? Yeah, so MS programs are a really great way, or postbac programs are a really great way to improve your GPA. I think really common postbac programs that people do are, you know, postbac in like anatomy or physiology, or postbac in advanced biology, or postbac in chemistry. A lot of schools have programs like that. So really, it's just they just want to see that you're taking advanced coursework and that you're scoring well. That's it, right? So really, just if it's science or anatomy based, then if it's like they want to see that you can do well on higher level science courses for sure. Make sure it's something science based. You can do like an anatomy and physiology postbac. A lot of my friends did that, and you know they studied really hard and they got a good GPA, and that really helped them. That's what I recommend. And for non-traditional applicants, to be honest, I mean the advice is just don't doubt yourself. I mean I think there's so many non-traditional applicants or people that are in my class right now, people that took multiple years in between undergrad and med school, right? Just be able to freely talk about, you know, why you took that time off, why you decided to apply now instead of later. To be honest, besides that, I would just be confident in yourself. You don't need to be, you don't need to have directly, you know, gone straight from undergrad to med school. There's so many people now that are non-trad that I don't think it's something you should even worry about. Just be confident in yourself. Someone asked, do you think med schools would appreciate if someone volunteered for the Red Cross? Yeah, I think totally. I mean, again, you got to make sure that it's meaningful to you. If you volunteer at the Red Cross and you're able to write about an experience that you felt was amazing, and you write about that in your personal statement, or you write about it in your application, there's going to be like a 1 to 2 paragraph opportunity for you to talk about your experiences, and you can talk about, oh, in Red Cross, like I was able to help this family out or this community out, and it was really impactful to me. I think it'll be great. So med schools really will appreciate anything that you did that you're passionate about, right? I don't want to say that you should do Red Cross just because you think med schools will like it. If you think that that's something that you will enjoy doing and that you will gain a lot of satisfaction about, and you can talk about, if someone asks you in your interview, like, what did Red Cross mean to you, then 100% do that. How much did you budget for the entire application process and MCAT? That's a good question. I would say that applications can get expensive, to be honest, because each school that you apply to, you might have to spend around $70 to $80 on sending your application. I will say that for certain disadvantaged students, you can get a waiver to these fees. So instead of having to pay $70 to each school that you're sending an application to, and I would keep in mind that you have to send a fee when you send in your primary, but also when you send in your secondary. So it's kind of like 2 fees to that school, along with then you're going to have to interview at the med school, right? So you got to fly, you got to book a hotel. I want to reiterate, guys, that applying to medical school is expensive. I think it's really hard for me to answer this budget question just because I don't know people's financial status. So it's really hard for me to answer how much you should budget. I just want to say that, you know, I think applying to med school is going to be expensive. So anything that MCAT will be expensive, but med school in general, guys, is really, really expensive, right? I think the investment that you can put in now is going to be really worth it. Now, this doesn't also mean for you to go overboard and buy every single MCAT material prep that's possible, and you know, hire some private tutor or something if it's really expensive. I don't think you need to do that. But I think it's really hard for me to answer the budget question. But I will say that it is quite expensive. You could be looking at spending upwards of, in total, from, you know, almost looking at maybe $1,200 in total with everything, just for MCAT prep and sending your application. Then after that, I mean, if you're talking about flying to schools, I mean, you know, if you get an interview at UCSF in San Francisco, you got to fly across the country and get a hotel, or maybe you can live with a student or something. But that right there is going to be a couple $100 just for the flight. So it's really hard for me to answer the budget question, but it is going to be quite expensive. But I just want to say that med school in general is very expensive. So this is a small investment. Everybody has to do it. I had to do it. It wasn't great, like, to dish out all that money, but alhamdulillah, it's worth it. Okay, I'm gonna try to answer some of the questions above about AP courses in high school. Okay, I think I just want to address everybody that's in high school right now. To be honest, guys, like, med schools don't care what you did in high school. No med school ever asked me what course you took in high school at all, right? Like, med schools just do not care what you did in high school. It really matters about what you did in undergrad. So you can, I mean, I would say in high school, try to take the most challenging course load that it's possible for you. I took like as many AP classes as were offered to me because I wanted to get into a good undergrad. But again, you don't need to be at the best undergrad to get into good med school. You can not do as well in high school and then really just do super well in undergrad and get into a great med school, right? So I just want to stress, guys, that like med schools do not care what you did in high school. They don't even care about your extracurriculars in high school or anything like that. They only care about what you did in undergrad. That's why I've been kind of straying away from answering high school questions. But to be honest, they don't care. I think someone said, what are some examples of some clubs you were in high school and how many of them is enough in your opinion? I think that's a really tough question to answer. How many is enough? Just do stuff you're passionate about. If you're in one club, but you like go super hard at it and you get into like nationals of a tournament or something, like that's super great. If you're like doing like Scholastic Bowl or Quiz Bowl or something like that, and you're able to go to state competitions with friends, if you do Science Olympiad and you get super far into it, that's great. You don't need to have like a list of 3 clubs in mind or something. Just do things you're passionate about. Honestly, I'm being very real. If you do things that you're passionate about, you will go far in them. Colleges love to see that you went super far in one thing than that you were just mediocre at 3 things. Guarantee you. So the clubs I did Science Olympiad, I did Scholastic Bowl. I did this thing called mini medical school. If you guys want to look into that. I did volunteering at the hospital, Edwards Hospital. I also did some research over the summer. I just emailed a professor at Northwestern, asked to do research with them. I think if you guys want to do research, go ahead and just email professors that you think might be open to having high school students. I don't know how important that was in my application to getting into Duke for undergrad, but again, med school, focusing on med school specifically, guys, like they just don't care at all about anything you did in high school. So that's that. Someone asked, what do you mean by well-rounded student? And I just want to say, if I'm running over time and we have to end the meeting, feel free to cut me off, by the way, as well.
No, please go, please go.
So what does it mean to be a well-rounded student? I think a lot of people try to sort of game the system, right? They try to have like what 5 things do I need to do that's going to make me super well-rounded? I think honestly, well-rounded student is just somebody that's able to, do well in school, but also that they're a person. So when you read their application, they show you the things that they're interested about. If you love playing basketball and that's something that you really enjoy, like you can talk about that in your college application. You could say that I love going to basketball tournaments. It's something that I love to do. Talk about that in your essay. Someone that's, you're able to, volunteer as well. So, you care about your community. I think a lot of undergrads, institutions and med schools especially love when you can really make an impact on your community. So ask yourself constantly, whether that be ICN, whether that be Naperville, whether that's Aurora, how can I make an impact on my community? Can I hold a drive for people that are struggling in my community? Can I maybe help tutor students? Well-rounded, just means that, you're able to do well in school, but also that you're a person outside of school and that your application kind of shows what you're passionate about. If you feel like your application can show what you're passionate about and that can really kind of just showcase all the things that make you you, then you've killed it, in my opinion, right? Like that's like, med schools love to see that you're a real person, not that you're just someone who has a 4.9 and has taken every AP and has just volunteered like everybody else. Do things that you're passionate about. And when you do that, it'll shine through your application, I promise. What should I do if I have a low science GPA? Retake those courses with an A or do postbac/masters? Yeah, so if you have a low science GPA, I'm actually not sure. Some colleges won't even allow you to actually retake the course. If your college does allow you to retake the course, like if you did really, really bad in a certain course, I would say, if you got a B in a course, I don't think you should retake it. But let's say you took a course and you got like a C or maybe a D. I'm not sure what score you got in that course. then it might be worthwhile to have a conversation with the advisor at the school, or, yeah, like talk to an advisor and just ask them, do you think that this would be beneficial to me if I retake this course? But to be general, I think if you want to show that you're able to score well in advanced science courses, postbac is the way to go. Really only consider retaking the course if it's like you completely just did terrible in it, and something else happened, that you occupied your time and you could do so much better this time around. The worst thing would be that if you retook this course and let's say you got a C and then you retook it and you get a B plus. I mean, if you retake it, you should get an A or A plus. Like, so really, if you're confident that you can retake this course and get an A, a solid A, that's when I'd say retake it. So someone asked, what did you do to study nicely for the SATs or ACTs? So again, this is more of a high school question. I mean, to be honest, I just did practice exams. I mean, I got the SAT, ACT book. Back then, I still think now you could decide to take whichever one that you like more. So I took the SAT. I thought the SAT was really hard for me. I wasn't able to score as well on it. I took the ACT and I liked the ACT more. So I said, okay, I'm going to focus on the ACT. And then I just started doing practice exams on the weekends leading up to the ACT. I think a lot of people think that I'm holding something back or I'm not sharing a secret. But to be honest, guys, like I don't have any secret ACT tips, to be honest. I just decided between the SAT and ACT which test that I liked more, and then I just practiced on the weekend. The biggest way to score well on these exams is practice. You can read all the theories and strategies that you want. To be honest, the content of the actual exams are not that tough. I mean, the math content of the ACT is like pretty basic level math. It's really about, can you do all these things quickly and be able to think on your feet quickly. The best way that you're going to do that and get good with time management is if you just practice. So best way to do that is to just practice. And someone asked, what's the best way to practice for the SAT? Buy practice exams. That's literally it. There's a million practice exams available from like a million test companies. So just practice. That's literally it. How to practice is, best way to practice is just do the exam. And literally like get up early in the morning, do that 3-4, I forget how long the SAT and ACT even are now, but do that 3-4 hour exam in total. And then maybe in the evening, you can spend time reviewing it. And that way you can still have a Sunday left to chill or to, do homework and things like that. Somebody asked, do you take subject matter tests? Yes, I did. I took 2 subject matter tests, SAT subject tests. I took chemistry and I took math. Only reason I took chemistry and math was because I remember when I was applying to undergrad, I saw a lot of people that were getting into these schools had taken chemistry and math, and they had scored well in those subjects. And I guess that was just a way for them to make their application stand out. Not stand out, but more just like kind of a show that, they were good in those things. And I figured, I'll take like a month or 3 weeks or something to study really hard for these subject tests and take them. And that's all I did. I would say don't stress too much about the subject test. You got to make sure your SAT is really important. So SAT, if you do well, that's great. Subject tests are things on the side where if you feel like, you've already done well on the SAT, you have some extra time to make your application a little bit better, you can do a subject test. How do you weigh guaranteed med program versus traditional one? Now, this is a good question. Okay. So, yeah, I think I applied to guaranteed med programs as well for undergrad. But personally, for me, I wanted to sort of figure out if medicine was for me. I think even in undergrad, I think there were some times where I really doubted. I don't know if medicine is going to be for me. Like being a doctor is like, guys, I just want to say that being a doctor is super tough, right? I mean, you're going to have quite a difficult lifestyle. You're going to have to work late hours. You got to be really passionate about what you're doing. To be honest, I just didn't feel like I was at the maturity level in high school to decide that for me. I think when I went to Duke for undergrad, I was surrounded by so many more people, so many more opportunities and resources. I was away from home. I think for that, biggest thing for me was that taught me the kind of importance of family to me, how much I valued having family time. And I mean, career is important to me too, but I think, when you're at home, when you're surrounded by friends and family all the time, it's super easy to say, I want to go super far in my career and I want to focus and become the best surgeon ever. And that's all I care about. When you get away from family for a little bit, you start realizing that, a lot of these things matter to you. At least they matter to me. And so I talked to a bunch of people about med school and about, really looked into what the different parts of healthcare are. And I think that's why for me, the traditional route was really great. I realized from the traditional route that I like tech and medicine. I was able to do computer science at Duke, and that's a huge part of, what I like to do now. I love reading about tech and different things in medicine and technology. That's really passionate, like something that I'm really passionate about. And I feel like if I was in a guaranteed program, I think I would be so focused on just med school that I wouldn't explore and kind of figure myself out. I don't want to like steer people away from guaranteed med programs. I think, you know, for certain people that if they know for sure and they're at the maturity level where they can say that I know medicine's for me, and like 10 to 20 years down the line when I'm a doctor, I'm going to be happy. And like, this really is something that I'm passionate about. Then yeah, go for a guaranteed med program. But I think really you got to just ask yourself, like, you know, do you feel like having these 4 extra years where you get to figure yourself out and where you get to, you know, figure out your passions, maybe, you know, really realize if medicine's for you, kind of try other career paths as well. Maybe try econ, try business, try consulting, you know, try policy, things like that. Because in high school, to be honest, like you haven't even tried the other career paths, right? You don't even know if you like if you like business or you like policy. I don't want to steer people away from medicine. I think medicine is great. I mean, I'm doing it, but I'm just saying that it's really a personal decision. If you do guaranteed med and you get into it and medicine's your life, and you know that, that's great. So someone asked, no, that's a really good question. I'll get back to the high school question. Someone asked, based on passion projects, does it have to relate to the career you plan on pursuing? No, absolutely not. If you're really interested in just painting and drawing because you like it, do it. Do it. I mean, literally, you could talk about in your personal statement how like drawing and painting was something that really was something that calmed you down and something that you really enjoy. And when you apply to med school, a really common question they'll ask you is, what sort of diversity are you bringing to our class? And you could say that, oh, well, what makes me diverse is I'm a really passionate about art, and I really like making art because I feel like it can really help me express myself. If you like playing sports, you can talk about, you know, I was really involved in sports throughout my undergrad, and that was a way for me to just wind down. But I really hope that I can, you know, start maybe a league when I get back, or when I get to this med school. I'm doing so much talking, guys. I feel like I have like my throat is like gone right now, so I apologize.
We really appreciate the time.
No, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, your passion project does not need to be something related to medicine or your career. It just makes you something that you could talk about, that when they ask you, like, you know, why is I'm gonna use a random person name, like, why is Tom super, like, what is Tom gonna bring to our med school class? Oh, Tom's really great because he, you know, he's like a brilliant student, but also he just loves art, and I really can't wait to see what he does related to art when he gets here. Or Tom's great because he also loves coding, and maybe he could think about how to bring coding into med school. So yeah, passion project does not need to be related to your career. Do things that you're passionate about, and they'll shine in your application for sure. Somebody asked, did you do more volunteering during college or high school? And also asked, did you volunteer a lot during your high school years? I think I did more volunteering in college. High school, to be honest, the only volunteering that I really did was I did like Feed My Starving Children a couple times. I volunteered at Edwards Hospital. You don't need to, again, people will have like 2,000 hours of volunteering when they apply to undergrad. If that's you, that's great. I didn't have that. I like volunteering, but I never made volunteering seem like a chore. You know, volunteering is great, but when it becomes like a chore and you feel like you're chasing some number like 2,000 or something, then at that point, I think you're not really getting the point of it. So, yeah, I can't even recall the amount of hours that I listed on volunteering in high school, but Edwards, to be honest, I can't imagine it being more than 100, maybe a little bit more than 100, but yeah. And then, did you do more volunteering during college or high school? Oh, I already answered that. Yeah, college. College, the volunteering that I did was just at Duke Children's. So I volunteered with kids that just recently undergone cancer therapy, was able to just play board games with them and kind of cheer them up, and also talk to their parents and stuff. I think it was really rewarding for me, and something that I talked about in my application, and something that people asked me about during interviews, and I loved what I did, so I was able to talk about it. So yeah. So I'm looking at the chat. Oh, there we go. Another question. Great. Your computer science undergrad is unique for med school. Wonder how many engineering grads are you? How many engineering? I think they're trying to ask how many engineering grads are with you in med school.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's one thing that helped me stand up maybe a little bit. I was really interested in computer science and coding. I worked at a startup during my gap year. Actually, I worked at a startup in Chicago. You know, it was I think coding was something that was super fun, and I want to hopefully be able to somehow, I don't know what I want to specialize in yet, but whatever specialty I decide to go into, hopefully I can bring in sort of a tech lens to it. Not sure how I'm going to do that, but hopefully I'll figure that out. But there's a ton of engineering grads. One of my best friends, she's a biomedical engineering grad. I mean, there's quite a bit of engineering grads. There's CS grads, biomedical engineering, electrical engineering. There's a mechie person in my class. And again, there's people that did things like dance and did things like music. So there are 100% engineering people in my class, and I mean, they're amazing. I mean, this girl in my class, she is a biomedical engineering graduate from Harvard College, and she's just, I mean, she's incredible with the amount of things that she's doing. So yeah, tons of engineering grads. If you're interested in engineering and that's what you're passionate about, please do that. Okay. So someone asked, I understand that getting a leadership position in clubs you're interested in is important, but let's say due to competitiveness, you're not able to have that chance. What are some ways to show your leadership skills outside of school, and does that add value? Yeah, of course it does. I actually think showing leadership skills outside of school probably offers more than offering it in school. I mean, everybody's gonna like, you know, try to be like president of the Undergrad Research Society or president of MSA or something like that, right? So, you know, those things are good, but med schools are kind of tired of saying those same things. You can 100% show leadership outside of that. Maybe you start a program up at ICN where maybe you help mentor students. Maybe, for example, let's say you're a sister at ICN and you want to basically encourage more women and more females to go into STEM because you think that's really important to you. And that is something very important. Maybe you start a program where you kind of it's a pipeline program where maybe you connect. Maybe you try to inspire some of the younger Muslim girls at ICN to, you know, get more inspired in STEM. Maybe you like hold fun experiments for them to do. There's so many fun experiments that people can do to learn about engineering and STEM. Maybe you can hold a program like that. And when you lead that program and you're founder of that program, that shows a huge leadership skill set. So that's one way. You could start maybe like you know, I know a lot of us are from international countries. Maybe there's a problem back home in Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Iraq, Afghanistan. I'm not sure where everyone's watching is from, but maybe there's a problem back home that you're really, you know, worried about. That's maybe it's COVID related. Maybe you want to encourage COVID awareness. Maybe it's safe drinking water, and you want to, you know, work with an NGO to maybe raise funds for that. Maybe you know, get together and you maybe hold like a charity drive where like maybe you put Mandi on people and they give you money, and then you can send that money to you know, a drive that is in India that helps give people clean drinking water. It's a huge leadership potential. And to be honest, I think those activities are a lot more meaningful than you being a president of MSA. Not saying you're president of MSA, it's a bad thing, but there's many, many ways to show leadership skills outside of school. And to be honest, I think they add more value than when you're just a vice president of some random club that you don't even feel like you're doing a lot at. So hopefully that answers that question. I don't see any other questions in the chat right now. If people feel more comfortable unmuting themselves, you can do that too. I know it's been we've gone it's been 30 minutes over 1 p.m.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking over if you left any questions unanswered. Looks like we answered all of them or most of them.
Cool,
No, I
guys.
do want to thank for taking time. I think it's been a very productive and useful session. Inshallah, we should have similar one that focuses on other careers as well. That will be useful for the community.
Inshallah, we'll try to do something. Yep.
Great, yeah.
Question, Maaz, on studying habits or something to that effect somewhere here.
Studying habits for studying for what?
For in general, this is more for SAT, I think. Yeah, SAT and ACT. How should you?
So, I mean, for that, I think the biggest thing, like I said, is just practice, right? I think it's really, you know, you can read all the theories about SAT, like, you know, there's so many videos you can watch about how to best study and how to tackle certain math problems and things like that. But to be honest, like, as long as you get the basic skill sets down, at that point, just start practicing. Like I said, just try to take, I mean, leading up to your SAT, I guess it depends on when you're signed up for it. But the biggest thing is you want to try to do as many practice exams as possible. So, you know, on the weekend, maybe take a Saturday and, you know, wake up early, take 3 to 4 hours, take an SAT. After that, you can relax during the day, and then in the evening, review which questions you got right or wrong. That way you can still have Sunday to chill and do your homework. So
does it help to form a study circle in which, you know, you join a group of other friends and together motivate one another to take the SAT or ACTs?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great way. I think it's a great way to maybe have a group of friends where you could be like, hey man, like let's make sure that, it's Saturday. Like I know like this week flowed and we have like we had an exam on Friday and like we're super tired, but like let's just get up on Saturday morning, man. Let's get up and let's take this SAT. And after that, maybe we could maybe you can grab some food, or maybe you can chill, and after that we can review that SAT together. I think it's really good. I mean, you just got to make sure that you're keeping yourself accountable, and if being in a study group helps you do that, fantastic. But also, I think it's very easy for people to sort of be in a study group and then maybe meet together and then not get actually as much studying done as they wanted to. But this is more of a group. To just keep yourselves accountable, I think that's great. Just be like, hey, like I'm taking the SAT. Let's all start at the same time, or let's talk about how our scores are improving or what we can do and share resources and things. I think it's really great if there's a group of people that can do that, for sure.
Cool. Any other questions from the audience?
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, this is my email right here. So feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions specifically. I'll try to answer them. I'm going to be going into rotations pretty soon at the hospital, so I'll be quite busy. So I apologize if I'm not able to answer your questions immediately. I'm still in med school, so trying to deal with med school and exams and things like that is going to be a lot too. But if you guys have questions, definitely we'll try to answer to the best of my ability as much as I can.
Okay, so no more questions from the audience. Thanks for your time, Maaz. I really appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule to address the community. We are really proud to have one of our own being part of Harvard. It's a great achievement. Congratulations to you and your family for that. And then once again, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. And people on the call, if you have questions, obviously feel free to email. If you want additional programs or similar programs, like somebody mentioned about different other careers, send us feedback. We'll try to arrange some other high achievers from the community. Talk to our kids. We want our kids to have the best both in the dunya and akhirah. And that's all I have to say. And again, thank you. Until we meet again. Have a good one.
Sounds good. Take care, everybody.
Take care. Jazakallah.